Next plane is the XF-11, which is the airplane that Howard Hughes had crashed in. It's a twin-engine airplane. This was our flagship airplane. It was a daunting project, not without a lot of issues from the construction stage. These are guys here. That's Ian putting the fiberglass in the mold. That's me back there supervising the installation of the carbon fiber. We use 2 layers of 4-ounce glass and then carbon fiber strips and then aerosol that we'd sandwich in between the layers of fiberglass to make the skins for that. We had some issues with the wing, so we ended up having to weld that and make it into a one-piece wing. It made it a little difficult to transport it and move it around, and I think it took like 8 to 10 people to pick up that wing when we were finished with it as one piece and load it up. There's a picture of the engine installation, the cowl, and of course the hydraulic landing gear. Those landing gear were kind of tricky as well. Think about this, you've got, the way the XF-11 works, you've got all the landing gear forward when down. Obviously when the plane retracts, you got 3 landing gear going back, an average distance of about 18 inches. So they probably weighed about 110 pounds. All 3 gear, we felt that was going to be an issue. When the gear retracted, the plane might go CG aft. There's a couple pictures from the flight. So the XF-11, our first flight was at San Bernardino Airport, or Norton Air Force Base. Most of the crew that was on the flight line that day had stayed up, well, at least 40 hours preparing for that. We were pretty exhausted, and the weather hadn't really cooperated for the film cameras. So it had that gray, overcast sky, and that didn't help the guys when they filmed it. So we still flew 2 times there. Now this is another thing. Think about this. So if you guys are modelers and you know how it is to go on a first flight test, you'd prefer not to have 400 people watching you, no pressure. Just go out and test your plane for the first time. And by the way, make sure it works. Plane has to fly perfect. There was a lot of pressure on us for that plane to work that day. About 3 or 4 months later, the film company decided they needed some additional shots, and the airport of choice at that point was Catalina Island. They've got a wonderful airport there. They call it the airport in the sky. We went out there, they did some shots with a helicopter that worked out just perfect. Spruce Goose. It's the 3rd plane in our primary models that we developed for the Aviator. This plane actually posed an interesting problem. Think about this. So the H-1 Racer, we flew a big 360cc gear-reduced 2-stroke with a variable pitch propeller. On the XF-11, we used counter-rotating propellers and twin opposed 2-strokes. But it's a twin, so you've got issues with a twin airplane versus a single. So here now we're in multi-engine seaplane. And the primary concern of the film people, of course, is scale detail. There's 2 criteria here. We had to keep the engines inside the nacelle, and we had to be able to start it somehow, and the plane's in the water, Long Beach Harbor. So I met a fellow by the name of Don Holfeld and another fellow named George Peters. And they set up they brought these little motors to me that I could put in my hand and said, here's the motors you need to use to pick up the Spruce Goose, maybe 200-300 pounds. But I said, okay, we'll give it a try. And we did the same thing. We counter-rotated the propellers, starboard and port, as is the case always. The first flight test, oops, uh-oh. This is a Windows computer. Didn't like that? Okay, well, there's Windows for you. I can keep talking about that a little bit. So on the Spruce Goose, when we took that out there, it was a big push to get it out in the harbor on a Sunday, and filming was on Monday. So we had a big rush to get the plane out there, and I remember talking with Bill Hempel again on the way. They put us on a flat barge and took us out to a spot in the Long Beach Harbor where we could actually fly the plane. And again, it was a little historic because you're in rough approximate location of where Howard Hughes took off that plane. An event like that has never taken place before or since. I was under the impression that the port of Long Beach was shut down while we were in the air doing this. So there was, again, a lot of pressure on us to make sure the plane flew. We hadn't water tested it. We had no way to do that. So we weren't sure if it was going to float or sink. Plus we had, I think, about 160 nickel metal hydride batteries on board, which don't particularly enjoy being around salt water. And you've got electric motors inside these nacelles. So, you're hoping that salt water's not going through them. Anyway, on the barge out there, I remember talking with Bill, and I said, that's perfect. I asked him, I said, what do you think? And Bill's a normally very calm, cool pilot. He's a military pilot and very professional. So he just looked at me and said, he shook his head and he said, I don't think we're going to make it. So we thought, well, the worst case scenario is we could, tow the plane up with a Zodiac boat and then get that flight, the shot that, Howard Hughes had where he just flew the plane in ground effect. I figured we could do that. At least they had a good airfoil. I'll skip to the next slide here to show you that. Yeah, this is us on the first flight test. Any case, Billy just blipped the throttle and immediately you could hear the water go right through the propellers into the engine nacelles. Everybody at one time said, go, throttle it. And he hit a couple of bumps on the way out of there at full power, and to our complete shock, that plane came out of the water at about a 45-degree angle, like it was shot out of a cannon. So that's a big testament to electric motors. But it was obviously very exciting. The plane flew great. I think at some point, Bill just pulled back to half throttle and allowed the plane to cruise around and landed the plane perfect. So that really worked out good.